Well, welcome all for our 118th Interfaith Prayer and Discussion meeting. We have been having this since this COVID started, and the purpose is to remove the religious prejudice, probably one of the most serious prejudices in the world, so that we can bring about unity and peace, and also to enhance the devotional characters of our society. So our chief guest today is Jill Biddington, who lives in Croydon. So we are honored to have her here. And I invite her to do the honoring the indigenous people and land now, and then we will go to the devotional part.
So I am joining from Wangal land, which is the name of the clan that used to live on these lands in Croydon. And wherever you are, maybe you want to type in the chat the lands from which you join so that we can acknowledge all. And let us acknowledge and value the tradition of the custodians of the lands that we're joining on. Well, the lands and the waters, because that's important too. And recognise the very precious continuous culture and traditions of First Nation people and their connection to the environment and to each other. Let's pay respects to those who once were, to the elders, to those of the present, and those who are emerging as leaders. Like many people, the ashes of my parents and family members are buried here in Australia. And so I feel a very deep connection to this land. And I love the fact that we have had such a very close connection through the care and traditions of First Nations people. And thank you for recording in the chats. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. It's really an honor to have someone like you who is passionate about the indigenous people and their affairs. I think Marina, you have just joined. You will be reading number 8 reading.
Okay, I can do that. Yep.
Of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and his ways, past finding out. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Oh, who has become his counselor? Oh, who has first given to him, and it shall be repaid to him. Oh, the depth of the riches, both of the wisdom and knowledge of God. Unsearchable are his judgments and his ways, past finding out. was given to him, and it shall be repaid to him. For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever. For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever. Amen. For who has known the mind of the Lord? Oh, who has become his counselor? Oh, who has first given to him, and it shall be repaid to him. For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever. For of him, and through him, and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever. Amen. Forever. Amen. Amen. Amen.
स्वयं को मेरी वाणी के महासिंधु में निमग्न कर लो। स्वयं को मेरी वाणी के महासिंधु में निमग्न कर लो, ताकि तुम उसके रहस्यों को उजागर कर सको और उसकी गहराइयों में छिपे हुए मणिमुक्ताओं को खोज पाओ। स्वयं को मेरी वाणी के महासिंधु में निमग्न कर लो। स्वयं को मेरी वाणी के महासिंधु में निमग्न कर लो, ताकि तुम उसके रहस्यों को उजागर कर सको और उसकी गहराइयों में छिपे हुए मणिमुक्ताओं को खोज पाओ।
O God, O thou who hast cast thy splendor over the luminous realities of men, shedding upon them the resplendent lights of knowledge and guidance, and has chosen them out of all created things for this supernal grace, and has caused them to encompass all things, to understand their inmost essence, and to disclose their mysteries, bringing them forth out of darkness into the visible world. He verily showeth his special mercy to whomsoever he will. O Lord, help thou thy loved ones to acquire knowledge and the sciences and arts, and to unravel the secrets that are treasured up in the inmost reality of all created beings. Make them to hear the hidden truths that are written and embedded in the heart of all that is. Make them to be ensigns of guidance amongst all creatures, and piercing rays of the mind, shedding forth their light in this, the first life. Make them to be leaders unto thee, guides unto thy path, runners urging men on to thy kingdom. Thou verily art the powerful, the protector, the potent, the defender, the mighty, the most generous. Abdul Baha.
O God, O thou, Daniel spoke and said, Blessed be the name of God, from everlasting even unto everlasting, for wisdom and might are his, and he changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and sets up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. He reveals the deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in the darkness, and the light dwelleth with him. I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hast given me wisdom and might, and hast now made known unto me what we desire of thee. For thou hast made known unto us the king's matter. Keshuvin writing Daniel 2:20-23. For to one is given by the Spirit the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another the gifts of healing by the same Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another discerning of spirit, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. But all these worketh that one and the self-same Spirit, dividing to every man severely as he will. King James Bible, Corinthians 12:8-11. There is no God but he. That is the witness of Allah, his angels, and just and due with knowledge.
Young, that is for Ahmad.
Sorry, I can't see the number.
There is no God. There is no God but he. That is the witness of Allah, his angels, and those endowed with knowledge, standing firm on justice. There is no God but he, the exalted in power, the wise. Holy Quran, verse 3. And when ye are told to rise up, Allah will rise up to suitable ranks and decrees. Those of you who believe and who have been granted mystic knowledge, and Allah is well acquainted with all ye do. Holy Quran 58. As long as the true knowledge and insight as regards these four noble truths was not quite clear in me, so long was I not sure whether I had won that supreme enlightenment which is surpassed in all the world with its heavenly beings, evil spirits and gods, amongst all the host of ascetics and priests, heavenly beings and men. But as soon as the absolutely true knowledge and insight as regards these four noble truths have become perfectly clear in me, there arose in me the assurance that I had won that supreme enlightenment unsurpassed, Buddha, the Word Eightfold Path.
The religion of God is the promoter of truth, the establisher of science and learning, the supporter of knowledge, the civilizer of human race, the discoverer of the secrets of existence, and the enlightener of the horizon of the world. How then could it oppose knowledge? God forbid. On the contrary, in the sight of God, knowledge is the greatest human virtue and the noblest human perfection. To oppose knowledge is pure ignorance, and he who abhorreth knowledge and learning is not a human being, but a mindless animal. For knowledge in the sight, for knowledge in life, felicity, perfection, and beauty, and can cause the souls to draw nigh to the divine threshold. It is the honor and glory of the human realm, and the greatest of God's bounties. Knowledge is identical to guidance, and ignorance is the essence of error. Happy are those who spend their days in the pursuit of knowledge, in the discovery of the secrets of the universe, and in the meticulous investigation of truth. Abdul Baha, some answered questions.
Know that there are two kinds of knowledge, the knowledge of the essence of a thing and the knowledge of its attributes. The essence of each thing is known only through its attributes. Otherwise, that essence is unknown and unfathomed. As our knowledge of things, even of created and limited ones, is of their attributes and not of their essence, how then can it be possible to understand in its essence the unbounded reality of the divinity? For the inner essence of a thing can never be known, only by its attributes. For example, the inner reality of the sun is unknown, but it is understood through its attributes, which are heat and light. The inner essence of man is unknown and unfathomed, but it is known and characterized by its attributes. Thus, everything is known by its attributes and not by its essence. Even though the human mind encompasses all things, and all outward things are in turn encompassed by it, yet the latter are unknown with regard to their essence, and can only be known with regard to their attributes. How then can the ancient and everlasting Lord, who is sanctified above all comprehension and imagining, be known in his essence? That is, as created things can only be known through their attributes and not their essence, the reality of the divinity too must be unknown with regards to its essence and known only with respect to its attributes. Abdul Baha, some answered questions.
Govern thy heart, constrain the entangled sense, resist the false, soft sinfulness which saps knowledge and judgment. Yeah, the world is strong, but what discerns it stronger, and the mind strongest, and high over all the ruling soul. Wherefore, perceiving him who reigns supreme, put forth full force of soul in thy own soul. Fight, vanquish foes and doubts, dear hero. Slay what haunts thee in one shapes and would betray. Hindu Bhagavad Gita. Jill.
Thou hast asked concerning the fundamentals of religion and its ordinances. Know thou that first and foremost in religion is the knowledge of God. This attaineth its consummation in the recognition of his divine unity, which in turn reaches its fulfillment in acclaiming that his hallowed and exalted sanctuary, the seat of his transcendent majesty, is sanctified from all attributes. And know thou that in this world of being, the knowledge of God can never be attained save through the knowledge of him, who is the dayspring of divine reality, the Bub.
We cherish the hope that through the loving kindness of the all-wise, the all-knowing, obscuring dust may be dispelled and the power of the perception enhanced, that the people may discover the purpose for which they have been called into being. In this day, whatsoever serveth to reduce blindness and to increase vision is worthy of consideration. This vision acts as the agent and guide for true knowledge. Indeed, in the estimation of men of wisdom, keenness of understanding is due to keenness of vision. The people of Baha must, under all circumstances, observe that which is made and seemly and exhort the people accordingly. Tables of Baha'u'llah. O God, dispel all those elements which are the cause of discord and prepare for us all those things which are the cause of unity and accord. O God, descend upon us heavenly fragrance and change this gathering into a gathering of heaven. Grant to us every benefit and every food. Prepare for us the food of love. Give us the food of knowledge. Bestow on us the food of heavenly illumination. Abdul Baha.
O bestower, the ever loving.
Well, thank you, friends, for the lovely reading. And we are now coming to the presentation by our friend Jill Biddington. I only came in contact with Jill when I posted on social media that inviting friends to give talks at our interfaith meeting on any topic that they are passionate about that is conducive to unity. And Jill responded that she would. So she kindly accepted to give a talk, and she is passionate about many topics of social justice. So I said, okay, you can give a series of talks, maybe once a month or once in 2 months. So this is a short brief that she has given. I hope everyone can see the screen. She's a union official and educator. She entered the union movement as a rank and file member in the finance industry and was leader of one of the 5 unions that amalgamated to form the finance sector union. She has also worked for the New South Wales Nurses Association, the Liquor, Hospitality and Miscellaneous Workers Union, Unions New South Wales, and the ACTU Organizing Center. She has a particular interest in the training and development of union leaders and managers, specifically around change, development, and democratization for the increased participation of rank and file members. Probably her talk is closely related to this. Jill is active in her local community and has an interest in working with migrant workers, opposing racism and exploitation, and advocating for better mental health services. She has worked for community organizations and for international development organizations and is a peace activist. She lives in Croydon, where we live. And maybe if you look at her Zoom name, I think still you have MEAA. Is that there? No, you are taking it away. You had MEAA, something like that. That is, she's currently with the media, entertainment, art, and all those people, the union for that union, she is actively involved with that. And she earlier showed her t-shirt, which is promoting the Uluru Statement and the voice to Parliament. So she is passionate about these things as well. So I welcome Jill to give her talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siva. Kumari, can you hear me clearly? I noticed you just wrote in the chat that you were having trouble hearing. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear clearly, but it's not loud enough. So sorry to say that.
No, that's okay. I'm not sure that I can do anything about the sound, but maybe Siva can. And please please wave at me if I need to speak more loudly.
Also, if you could increase your volume in your own computer.
Yes.
Yes. So, as Siva explained, he put a post on our community group in Croydon. I thought, oh, well, I'm happy to talk to everybody. I'm going to talk to this group. And I chose the subject of democracy and the ethics of the trade union movement because that's truly my passion. But I could talk for ages about why this is important. I can't do that tonight. So I'm going to just say three things that to me emphasize why this is an important subject for us to talk about. The first is, in our history, we acknowledge that we are not the traditional custodians in Australia. I believe everybody here is part of a migrant group that's come to live in Australia. The first unionists in Australia were actually transported as convicts from England, from a very small town in Dorset, which is called Tolpuddle. And they were transported to Australia because they were farm workers who were finding the cost of living and the pressures of having their wages cut so dire that they were struggling to feed their families. In those days, the farm workers were very often members of the Methodist Christian denomination, and the people who had the power were members of the Anglican Church. Because the workers were members of the Methodist Church, they actually learnt to read and write because they studied the Bible. This gave them the important skills of being able to write down what they wanted. But because they did that, they were tried for sedition and transported to Australia in 1838 for hard labour. And some of them were here as convicts for as long as 15 years in Port Arthur. So that's part of our history. You know, we've taken our traditions from England. The other thing I know is that for about 100 years, trade unions have been a key actor in social justice and human rights in Australia. We worked with whoever the government was and the employers, and we worked trying to shape our society so that we had a free and safe and equitable society. It's not always equal, but that was our goal. But these days, we're so caught up in this modern day culture of focusing on difference and conflict rather than what we share in common, that we become like warring groups in society. And my challenge is to say that if we have to choose between what we have in common or what we share as conflict, we're really choosing about, will we have continuous relationships with others or will we be disparate and separate? And community and common, I'm sure, must have some Latin or Greek root that says that what we have in common is what binds us as a community. Community builds peace and cohesion when we talk to each other. Now, wouldn't you know that I can't, there you go, I've just got to change that. I've raised the issue of democracy and trade unions because I don't just live in a political bubble, and I really know that trade unions are very regulated and scrutinised, but this is not well known. It's very difficult to do very much in a trade union that, because we have published rules that we have to abide by, and because there are laws. One of the laws is called the Fair Work Act, and that requires the government and the legal system to ensure that we're acting in accordance with the rules and the legislation at all time. And if we don't, then as I read in the news today, we can be fined as individuals or as organisations. And people who offend the laws do get fined. One person from a union in Queensland who no longer works for the union has to pay $12,000 because he didn't follow the laws. This happens. This is quite common. I don't know whether it makes the media, and I'm not sure that people really understand this. One of the problems about why it's hard to understand these things is when I started 41 years ago, the Act was about 3/4 of an inch thick. These days, it's about 2 inches. We create laws, it creates complications, it creates diversions, there's a lot of noise in it, and then it becomes something which doesn't serve the community. It serves the lawyers or those who like to use the law. It's unintelligible to most workers. How can this be something that governs their behaviours in unions if they can't access it? And being able to access the law is just so important, being able to navigate it and understand it. You know, it might all have started with the 10 Commandments because we've got a Judeo-Christian legal tradition, but these days it's very difficult. So we're representative of our members, and just like politicians who are representative of their communities, we're not perfect. My thesis is not that we're perfect, but that we have to do better. The purpose of unions is something that's bound in history that's rarely spoken about in the community. We've got a purpose, a role, and goals. But unions as separate organisations aren't homogenous. One union is different to another union because they reflect and take on the culture of the industry. Like you would imagine that the behaviour in construction represents the behaviour of everybody in that industry. You know, the only time I've ever received a death threat is when I was working in that industry, and somebody who worked as a consultant decided that he didn't like my ideas at all. But that would never happen if I was working with the union in the retail industry, because they've got a different culture. So, you know, there's so many different types of unions that it's almost like different nations with different cultures, different language, different practice. But we are bound together as a social movement. But we know that governments aren't homogenous, and nor are employers, and nor are communities. You know, again, I go back to it's what we have in common that binds us, not what makes us different. The purpose of unions traditionally is not to go and beat up anybody else or make, you know, people feel threatened. The purpose of unions is as a human rights actor in society to ensure that those who work get a fair economic and social dividend for what they do. Our role is to win improvements for working people, not just members. We're not like the NRMA or the RACV. And we work to try to make Australia fairer. And that's why unions have traditionally argued for increases to the age pension or social security, or for JobKeeper, and for public education, for policing, and for other social services, because we're not a membership organisation, we're social justice actors. And the goals we have is to make sure that we exist to win and improve when the right opportunity exists. As you know, during COVID, there was a whole lot of things that the union movement did to make sure that businesses were funded so that workers could keep working. So there's dimensions to our movement, I think, that are worthy of remembering beyond what's written in the Daily Telly or in the Age or the Australian. When we talk about the purpose, the role and the goals, we've also got to be conscious times change, things evolve. And what I really feel at the moment is there's very high levels of disengagement of people within not only the union movement, but the community groups, the Girl Guides, faith-based groups, even the RSL. This state of individualisation in people's minds, especially in Western countries, is resulting in a whole range of pressures. We've never been busier, we've never been more time poor, but many of us take time and spend hours on devices, which make us even more isolated from other people. And unions aren't immune from this. And it puts pressure on us just to be a service-oriented organisation. And many people talk about the value of joining a union to be about kind of some weird form of insurance, protect your job. But in reality, we're not there just to protect or represent in times of grievances or disputes. Our role is so much bigger. But the pressure on the kind of cost-benefit analysis of consumerism means that people only want to talk about, what will you do for me? Not for us, not for my industry, and not for my community. And we have too much tension with people understanding that it takes all of us to be together. Excuse me. Once upon a time, Australia had a very clear articulation of the role of the state, you know, the government, the state, you know, and that was about, are we able to create quality public schools and education? Do we have a fair, accessible and equitable safety net for health in the country? Are we investing so that there are jobs and healthy communities? What is required for a healthy community? And as people joke, you know, they say NSW means Newcastle, Wollongong and Sydney. Actually, that's not what NSW stands for. We know that. But if you're like me from the bush in Queensland, then you're forgiven for thinking, you know, we're forgotten people. We aren't part of the picture. And so that articulation of what the role of the state is has converted into a social dialogue just about the economy and not about the health of our whole community. And that's a diminution of the unity that we need to be sensible and joined actors in our society. And I think that that agenda isn't working for any of us. Well, it's working for a minority, I guess, but this is why we've got these big wealth gaps and why we have so much disjointment and unity and disunity. You know, the ethics of social justice and social equality should be present in a way that makes us think about our relationship with the rest of the world, not just Australia. I'm an internationalist. What we do here does have an impact somewhere else in the world. I have stood beside the hole in the ground up in the Hunter Valley, where people from Kiribati and Tuvalu have looked and said, that hole is bigger than our whole country. Why do you keep digging coal while our country is going underwater? We are all connected. And because we don't have that consideration of the ethics that binds us and how we need to behave in relation to our broadest community, it means that people get caught up in kind of the political maelstrom of difference and distinction and power, rather than developing healthy communities. You know, the politics of greed is infectious, and if people feel they're missing out, they get angry. It raises anger, it raises dissatisfaction, and it promotes this sense of me, me, me. And I ask myself, how can I work with unions and ask them to be more ethical in their work when we don't have an ethical system that seems to prevail in industry and these days not in government? How do we come together ethically? That's, I think, the challenge. I don't mind if, you know, you think that unions are the pants, but I do mind that we don't have something which binds us. The key ethics for my mind to help build healthy communities is to preserve jobs, to keep family security, to bring fairness to those who work or who have worked, like retirees, or who will work, like young people, to make sure that we're developing industry and its capacity to be sustainable and to be of public good. So there's ethics in the power, but do we often think about them? I say to people I work with and mentor, well, what are our responsibilities to the community? Communities need jobs. They need skills. They need sustainability of the environment. Communities need inclusion to be able to experience the respect and dignity that work brings, or study. We need to think about our children and our older workers, the unemployed, the disabled, and those who fall through the system with no safety net. And in Australia, they are the migrants. They are not citizens and they are not given rights. But what's different about the ethics and our relationship with the industry? It's really the same. Our interest is to keep industries vibrant and to challenge the self-interest of competitor corporation with competitor corporation, maybe for shareholders, because when we offshore jobs, when we outsource jobs, the first damage is done to the community. Workers who don't have money to spend in the community will see the community suffer. So I think this is another part of our great web. And I know that's very uncomfortable because I know that CEOs receive huge bonuses if they keep shareholders happy and content. But, you know, is that enough for the nation? For working people, our ethical considerations must be about transitional arrangements for those who are impacted by climate change, who work in fossil fuel areas. How do we allow them the hope of a sustainable life? How do we create affordable education for all when we have children whose first experience in their lives of government is HECS, a debt? We are raising a generation of people who will be in debt to their own government. That's not what the taxation system used to do. It used to tax people once they earn. I'm very nervous about the way that we're treating young people. And I don't want to be like America, where young people owe their government billions and billions of dollars for their education. I think our other ethical considerations need to be, are we able to create and lift social services for all who need them? Or in the way that we work, if we're losing jobs from the region, what then happens to social services that maintain good communities? So in short, my challenge to unions is that we use our powers ethically for public good, not just for members, but also not just to keep self-serving corporations content. I think that's a really big ethical challenge for us. And it's not one that most people who are in a consumerist mode think about. So in finishing up, I guess I'd like to say I've got lots of questions, and this is my life and what I do. And I know that unions are in decline for a range of reasons. I know that unions have, you know, a particular perspective on life and how we engage with culture. I think we've seen particular change in politics here and the impact of overseas politics coming here. I think unions have bad press, and sometimes they deserve it, sometimes they don't. I also think that people who work generally don't experience exploitation if they have skills and experience, are educated and professional. But young people with degrees, with master's degrees, are working in fast food and hospitality because there's no jobs for them. TAFE doesn't provide enough skills access so that we have enough plumbers, electricians, sometimes bookkeepers and hairdressers. So how can unions be social change agents if in the current environment we have so many threats and challenges to keep people in jobs when really what we want to be doing is to be creating public good? How can we balance what is not balanced? It's going to take more than the union movement. And so for this reason, there's an organisation in Sydney called Sydney Alliance, which is the amalgam of organisations of faith, community groups and unions. And they come together because we know as human rights actors and social justice actors, we're the organisations that can speak on behalf of our communities. We need to work together in different ways now than ever before if we're going to keep our community safe, sustainable, and able to look after our community's needs. But what is it going to take outside of Sydney? Excuse me. That was a nice plane going somewhere. What's it going to take for us outside of Sydney to be able to build a national culture which is about healthy communities? That's not something I can do. That's only something that we can do. I'm quite happy to challenge my mob in my way, but I do think that understanding and thinking about what we've got in common is where we must go to make sure that we have unity. Thank you. Oh, you're very sweet. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Very interesting presentation, and a view probably we never had in our presentation so far. So for most of us, it is something new, but very important points that you touched upon. I just want to share one of the slides that we show in our screen, but I forgot to remind everyone because it's touched upon something that you mentioned. This is from the Universal House of Justice, that is the supreme administrative body of the Baha'i faith. They are based in Haifa, Israel. From a letter they wrote on the 25th of November 2020, they said, whether through deeds or words, the merit of your every contribution to social well-being lies first in your resolute commitment to discover that precious point of unity where contrasting perspectives overlap and around which contending peoples can coalesce. I think the core of this message you touched at the beginning of your presentation, and you emphasized the very same point that the Universal House of Justice was mentioning, that if you want to build a united community, we have to look at the common things and not at the differences or conflicts. So I also like to remind our participants, when we are going to discuss questions and answers, and find the precious point of unity in our discussion rather than the differences. And I also request our friends, whoever wants to ask questions or comments, please use the reaction button like this. Jung has already done. You can use this. If you don't know how to do that, use your hand, but only if I see your hand, I can call you to talk. So, so now I ask Jung to comment or question or whatever you would like to do.
Thank you, Jill. You express a lot of ideas in a very real life situation, as we are aware that the collective bargaining and the enterprise bargaining at the moment among public sector, especially public sector unions and employers, haven't worked very well so far. And you also mentioned about Fair Work Commission and the acts, Parliament acts, and legislation changes and everything. Do you know how many files that people have been dismissed, like dismissal, unfair dismissal, or lost a job because due to COVID-19? And you know, so obviously unfair and grievances and everything. That's why a lot of claims now go from here to there to different tables, and probably finally the Fair Work Commission have to do something about them, because there will be backlog. There will be backlog, and I'm sure there will be backlog. And the thing that with the idea that the government want to bring the migrants in here because of lack of staff, everywhere they say lack of staff, nobody work at all. So therefore, if we don't work, so we don't need unions. So therefore, we want to bring migrants in. But do we have a Safe Work Australia? Provide safety net, as you say, to prevent accident and injury and illness and mental problem from the migrant worker to come to Australia with no factory, no job, nothing. And how we going to guarantee their life in a very good way that we're supposed to provide to them. I have been side by side, work with Sally McManus, the ACTU secretary, years ago, so I knew her. And I said, well, we just discussed quite a lot of things. But what I'm saying is, we at the moment, as I see, we've been following the American step in different ways. The Americans never like to have unions around them, especially the employers. The employer doesn't want union. These union are, anybody belong to union, they want to keep a job very long. So that's the ideas, you know, capitalist ideas. So it's been running like for a few decades. But if you study about Bocock, Prime Minister Bocock,
Yes.
if you study his books, ACTU leaders, and you understand, and you understood. And then if you study comparative industrial relations between countries like Sweden and all other nations, including Japan, then we got a bigger picture about our real situation nowadays. It's a consequence of all the years previously run. You know, everything is outsourcing, everything is automation, everything is about cost effective. They don't really worry about how workers do, but cost effective work efficiency, projects cut, funding cut. And if you want to employ somebody, and if they belong to union, then the employers don't like to have unions around.
Yes.
So that's how you have told us a lot of real pictures that we've been aware of. But you say the gig economies, it come about too.
Yes.
During the COVID-19 and after the COVID-19, we have few jobs that pop up, you know, like Uber food delivery or something, taxi, not even a taxi. And
Yes.
if they have accidents, what's going to happen to them? They're going to sit down with Safe Work Australia and just say, what's the job? What's your work pay sub rate? What's the working conditions? And just say, for example, if we want to, like this, another aspect here, if we want to change our main constitution, the government will need a trade union to be around, because the union want to be around everything. As you say, social justice, social fairness. So the change of constitution, the amendment of constitution, we need a trade union to have some input into them.
Yes.
Make sure everything run okay. Because somehow people who work will have to rely on the unions. And like you say, you want to provide services to people who don't work. Because you want to help them. Like you want to help the society in a like large scale. So that's why this is only the other aspect of what I try to, you know, you already knew about them, obviously. Thank you.
I think we might be of a very similar mind on lots of things.
Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Yung.
Okay, and Ahmed.
Thank you, Jill, for that beautiful talk. Like a very professional physician, when they put their fingers on the pulse of a person and they can say what are the health issues of that person. You brought our social issues of today in front of us. I have actually two questions I'd like to put to you. The first one is that the social order of the current social order of our lives is no longer working and valid. And perhaps we have to have from grassroots a change in this social order in order to have any future for humanity. And the other one is that, do you think that greed has taken over in our society? And this is a spiritual disease that is taken over us. And we have to work on that in order to eradicate it. Otherwise, it will destroy our society.
Thanks, Ahmed. Can I answer those? Siva, are you okay if I proceed? So your first question was about the social order of our lives and asking whether we need grassroots change in order to make it better. And that is something that I absolutely believe in, and why I talk to people, or I talk with people, hopefully, rather than at them. Because our social order has been placed under the heaviest weight of globalization. And that means that not our local companies and corporations, but mainly those big corporations from the USA Sometimes they're from Europe, sometimes they're from other parts, but most often from the USA, have so many powers because in the USA, they have granted human rights to companies. So companies have got freedom of association rights that they can say, no, nobody can be a member of a union. It impedes our rights. How do we change this? We can't just change this in Australia. Australia, like many countries, has got a colonial past that is still very much about the power of the way that those who are in senior positions operate. Why do big corporations talk about needing to bring out migrant labour? It is not because we lack enough skilled people. It's because they want to use a divisive tactic to undermine and suppress wages. They are prepared to divide a community and to use overseas workers to do it. How do I get unions to stop arguing about the problems of how hard it is to organise migrant workers, instead of saying the problem is this ideology that says it's okay to divide us because we want a bigger share? Unless we are together, all of us, unless me and a whole lot of other union leaders can have that conversation with people who work, we won't be part of a grassroots movement. But I want the grassroots movement to happen everywhere because this is our lives. Our lives do not belong to the 1%. So I fully agree with you. Do I think that greed has taken over? Absolutely. And I'm not proud of it. And I'm really not very confident about how we're going to take it on. The social media platforms are superficial and facile, and they're a great way to waste time, but are they enriching us? Sometimes, in a minority of cases, yes. I look at TikTok and I think, why would anyone want to live in the United States? They're all at each other and yelling at each other. I don't want to be like that. Why have we got this enmity between people? When the movie Wall Street was made, and I've just forgotten, it's Oliver Stone who was the director. Have you seen this film, Wall Street? It's very old. Oliver Stone thought he was making a film that would show the awfulness of greed. He thought he was making a film that would diminish the character of Gordon Gekko. And then he said, I started getting all these letters from young people in colleges saying, I want to just be like Gordon Gekko. It really broke his spirit that what he'd made to educate a community turned around and became quite popular. So that's a very good interview if you want to look at that. Greed, self-interest, you know, they're not crimes, but they really are evil. You know, for people to want to have more, like how can Alan Joyce need any more money? How can anybody need more money when you earn that amount of money? And yet the organisation's got huge profits at the moment just to make up for what they lost. How many people lost their jobs? How many families? Not everybody got a settlement. Some people were outsourced workers. They got nothing. You know, I don't think that's equitable. Sorry, I did go on a bit.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Colin's got his hand up.
Yes, Colin.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. Yeah, I was in the it was called Radio and Electronics, but it became the Community and Public Sector.
Oh,
Union.
I know that.
Yeah.
What was his name? Adrian O'Connell. Did you know him?
Yeah, Yeah, he was in charge at the time. I don't. That was 22 years ago. I don't know what's happened to that union now, but I was in the aviation part of it, and there were a few things going on, and occasionally I was a union representative, but not a militant one. And I did find that the people who tend to get voted to be union leaders are the ones who are going to fight. So that probably isn't a great start. They're fighting for a very limited interest rather than the broader interest, which is not to say that there's not reasons for fighting sometimes, you know, and maybe that's where the problem is. People grow up as children in a conflictive, just getting used to conflict and not knowing anything better. And in the Wall Street case, you know, they go through school and go to university and think this is the way to get rich, and they're not really thinking of much else. But I was wondering, as far as union leadership and consultation with workers goes, do some unions do it better than others? And if so, what do they do better?
Some unions do it better than others, and it's got nothing to do with size and nothing to do with the financial state of the union. It's got everything to do with values. And, you know, the current generation of union leaders are actually younger than me, and they grew up at work, not as kids, but as kids, they probably grew up without really understanding what unions did. And then they became union officials, maybe because they were a bit mouthy. They've never had a really positive experience of having an industry development plan where you sit down together and you go, what do we want for people who work in this industry? They've grown up under enterprise bargaining. I was one of 5 people who voted against that, against the resolution at the Special Congress to condemn the Commission for saying we weren't mature enough to handle enterprise bargaining. The Commission made a decision in 1991 that said employers and unions aren't mature enough to deal with enterprise bargaining, and they were right. But only 5 of us said, we actually don't support you on this, Bill Kelty. I think that people look back at that and they say, yeah, well, maybe that was true. But the unions who are good at consulting with their members are the unions that believe in inclusion, not in the, gee, we've got to hang on to these few members. And, you know, it's a really bad business model. My union has recently had bargaining action at the ABC. And for about a year before it started, they went out and they were talking to people about what they wanted. And this week, you know, and they'd also had to invite David Anderson, who's the CEO of the ABC, to come in because some of his HR people had gone just a little bit ratty and wanted to talk about conflict rather than let's get on with what we're trying to do. He played a really good role, I understand. Our membership in that union more than doubled. We're now the primary union there. We didn't go out on strike because we did bargaining and campaigning and we played a strategy. The CPSU was really important to them too because, you know, the ABC is a jewel in their crown too. But different unions, different cultures, both of them consulting with delegates and members, different outcomes. Sometimes the culture of work and the way workers are treated just drives them to the point where they have to express how they feel. Consultation doesn't keep people happy. Sometimes it just reminds them how they feel that they have no respect from their managers. We can't be responsible for the entire relationship. When there's a problem in a relationship, it's everyone in the relationship, not just one. That's what I would say.
Is there
I don't know
any?
whether that's a bit roundabout, but that's what I would say.
It sounds like maybe there's a consultant to teach how to listen and how to be a bit more detached. I'm not sure.
Well, I think, I was around 40 years ago when HR people didn't exist because they were called personnel and they looked after people and their pay, and they were very, very keen on enforcing, what the agreement was. But these days we have many more people trying to not enforce things and get away with what the company can. That's culture. You grow up in that culture where the rules don't matter. It's mayhem.
Thank you, Jill.
Thanks, Colin.
Thank you. And Tracy, you put your hand up.
Yep. Anyway, thank you, Jill. That was a really interesting talk, and just that I really 100% agree with expanding the common good. I've been part of Sydney Alliance too.
Yeah, you're my sort of person, mate.
So I was glad to hear you give the Sydney Alliance a plug, because it's that whole thing of by working together to build the common good, we also learn that, we learn about each other.
That's
like
right.
I sort of, worked as a naturopath, and I haven't, we had a professional association, but we didn't have a union. But I've learned to value unions from being involved in the Sydney Alliance, and also from Thomas Mayer and the Uluru Statement campaign, and just sort of why, the voice is like a union, that collective organising together and making relationships makes for better outcomes. So anyway, all power to you, I say.
And to you too, Tracy, because if you know all those people, you're in the thick of it and you're doing a great job.
Thank you. Anyway, blessings.
Yes, I have a question, but others who have not spoken, and if you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand. You mentioned that probably the origin of unions were in 1800s, 1888, when the Anglican and Methodists. Now the role and the effectiveness of this union over these 2 centuries almost, it has not brought about the vision, the goal that you have envisioned in your talk. And I think in one of the questions, Ahmed mentioned about the greed and things like that, ethics. Now, do you think teaching these moral values and ethics to the children as early as possible is an important thing to bring about the changes? Because it doesn't matter, part of the humans are in the CEOs and the politicians and all these people, but if you were brought up in a way, I don't know what actually caused you to view these issues in this way, whereas many others don't. Is it because you were brought up that way, or you have some unique inborn qualities you have? But how to make this broader change in a global sense, and whether teaching morality to the children at the early age is one.
We are all an accumulation of experiences, aren't we? I don't know where I began and where I end. I remember as a little girl there was the American War with Vietnam and Australia joined in. And I remember watching on the ABC the films of very young men. And it was often raining and they were muddy and wet, saying, "Hello, Mum. Hi, Auntie Maeve. Hope you're well. Wish I was home for Christmas." And they would make these films of these young men. And that had a really big effect on me. I did not understand why there were Australian young men. To me, they were still young. I had a brother that age who was conscripted. Why did our government send them overseas? What was our business? And I think that that was probably the time I decided I'm not going to ever stand for war. I was a little kid. It seemed miserable to separate families to cause death. My dad had fought in World War II in New Guinea. I don't know why I was into social justice. I just am. I always thought that I'd probably be a teacher overseas, you know, not necessarily wanting to be an English teacher, but wanting to work overseas. And I've done that. I've worked on the Thai-Burma border. I've worked in the Pacific. I've had a really lucky life. We haven't achieved our vision, but we haven't finished yet. I think that every time we change, there is a rebalance somewhere else. We become all too predictable and used to that dance of how we're treated. But I think that, as you know, as Ahmed said, if we don't have that grassroots rising, how do we balance the power of corporations, which are largely behind the money of lobbying, and they have special privileges and huge influence? How do we work with the dairy farmers? How do we work with the potato farmers? You know, a whole box of potatoes, a Tasmanian potato farmer gets 30 cents. 30 cents. I pay $5.99 for a kilo of potatoes. The farmer got 30 cents. It's supply chain economics. Woolworths and Coles make 70% of their profits not out of the grocery dry goods, but out of fresh food. Who puts that food on our plate? Who are the farm workers? They're people from Southeast Asia, South Asia, and the Pacific. They come here on work visas and they're exploited and they're not taught their rights. That's who puts the food on our plate, not Woolworths or Coles. And increasingly, those workers are working for big companies like Jerry Norman, who owns Harvey Norman. He's got Australia's biggest cucumber farm. You put a cucumber on your plate from Woolworths or Coles, that's where it's coming from. How do we create a grassroots movement unless we educate people what's happening now? We have to educate to organise people, and people are so busy. And I say to people in the shops, you know, the worker who picked that cucumber probably earned about $2 for a whole box. And he's expected to do boxes all day. And at the end of it, he's got to pay for his airfare, his equipment, his health insurance, his accommodation, which is overpriced. And they tend to pay more out than get in. That's making more local Australians richer. It's not fair. We have to get smart and be different because this is not good for us. Sorry.
So the education is the key. Yes.
Education is always the key. Ignorance and busyness are really our enemy. You know, if you make friends with a visaed migrant worker, then share with them what you know about their rights, because, you know, we've had people in Australia, a Tongan man died of malnutrition because he was working physically and trying to send money home, but having to pay. You know, some of these people live in a 3-bedroom house with 5 to a room and 2 in the lounge room, and they still pay $250 accommodation. Who's making that money? These are people in cahoots. So he was eating 2-minute noodles 3 times a day. He was here for a year. He died. Couldn't go to hospital because even though they've got health insurance, they can never claim it. If you have a look at the submissions on the website for the inquiry into migrant workers, it'll break your heart. Salvation Army, United Church, a whole lot of submissions that came in from community groups, and it's stories of abhorrent exploitation. That's how our food gets on the plate.
Regarding education, Baha'u'llah said, regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom. So every human being, especially the children, we should consider as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. And education can alone bring the treasures out so that it can benefit the humanity. So education is the key, and you are an educator. So thank you for what you are doing. And Ion, and if there are no other questions or comments, probably this will be the last one.
You know, when we were, you know, you're probably aware of these sentences that Prime Minister Boko have expressed somehow, or in lectures at the university, people keep talking about about like years ago, they said people now should work smarter, not harder. So they advise people have to work smarter, not harder. The second option is when people create pies, you create wealth. Like Prime Minister Boko used to say, we create pies. Then we have to share the pies equally. If people work hard to create wealth, then that wealth distribution got to be fair. Just say the fair pay for work of equal value. If the engineering position jobs, then the male or female should have an equal pay for the same job, the same output, the same experience, the same skills. And the situation nowadays, when we move back now, we advance from the time of Prime Minister Boko said, we advance now, but the consequence, just last week, I listened to Parliament debate about superannuation for the women retirees.
Yes.
Only 140K. Yeah, 140K is average retiree for women. So all their working time, all the life they've been working very hard, but by retirement age, they didn't have much like the men do. And most of them become homeless because the men just say goodbye, left the house, and looking for green pasture. You know, they go and looking for adventure and green pastures. So good for their spirit. You know, when we talk about God, we believe in God. So God look after both men and women. But the superannuation debates was like, why women, working women, got so much less superannuation in their pockets, egg-saving, but the man got everything. The man that left the house, left the kids, have a good time, build up a green pasture somewhere. So that majority of women become homeless and hopeless. So I'm just want to remind people that is not an ethical picture for people who said that they belong to God or Jesus or Buddha. No ethics there, no morality there. Because people create wealth, create a family with everything, children grown up. But then when they share the wealth, they not share the wealth properly. Why we need a family code? So that's all I want to say, because you said trade union will try to involve in everything to bring goodness to people. And because we talk about interfaith here, so we just have another features of your real discussion about our current situation here. Thank you.
Can I just respond really quickly? Bob Hawke talked about smarter, not harder, but the current fashion for management is more around conformity and don't think, just do it, than it is about critical thinking and trying to develop better ways. Now, Colin, I wonder whether you've noticed that in your career, because you come from a professional technical background. But I know that we have very expensive work being undertaken because we have got half-baked supervisors who actually don't know the job, but they've got goals that have to be met. And so they say to workers, don't come and talk to me, don't think about it, I just want you to do it like that. It's not smart, it's actually dumb. Like, I'm not a capitalist, but I think I'd be better at it than they would because I understand what drives it. I think they're really dumb. And I don't understand. Okay, so when it came to paid parental leave, we said, I was one of the kind of leaders in the campaign. And in New South Wales, we said, we want it not to be an employment issue. We want it to be a universal government issue because small employers can't afford it. Big employers can, and they should pay for it. And we want the relationship to be with the employer so that there's continuity of work, but don't make it an impost on individual employers because then it just becomes inequitable. Now, because I'm a woman and I'm a worker, I should be treated equitably with a man, but my social contribution as a woman was to have 2 children. Why? The employer shouldn't have to be responsible for my social contribution as a mother, as a carer. Grandmothers who leave work early to look after grandkids to let their kids have a bit of a start, it's a social contribution. So I felt very strongly that employers should not have to pay for social contributions. They should pay workers for work. But the balance should have been met by the government. But very quickly after that came in, the Tony Abbott government changed it so it was an employment condition. Crazy. Because now we continue to have this gap. Why do we make employers responsible for employment conditions? Of course, it means that women will be affected. Of course, women have to take time out of work to have babies, to be elder carers, all of that business. We need to get our thinking straight, to think, to be knowledgeable, and stop pretending we're dumb and stupid.
Thank you, Jill. But you know, nowadays works all about computers and digital and everything. So people can stay on their systems as long as they like all day long. And they're supposed to switch off the computer when the time comes. People nowadays being pressured to put 4 days a week instead of 5 days a week. You know, they do a trial at the moment.
Yeah.
When people do 4 days a week, the same hours, but not 5 days a week. So in the long term, that's going to affect the health and safety and illness and injury and mental illness and all the rest of it.
Absolutely. Why are Western countries dealing with such a huge spike in mental health? It's got to be something that's about us.
Yes, thank you. And Ahmed and then Panya, and with that probably we will close up.
Jill, I got a personal question. Have you ever been on the National Press lecture, and have you given a talk there? Because I think you have so many solutions for social and economical changes that they really the place where people would listen or would hear about these things. My other question is, do you think strikes are not the way and consultation is the way rather than having strikes? Would the solution come by consultation rather than starting strikes?
Mm-hmm. So the first question, I've never been at the press club address, and that's very amusing because that's for important people. I'm not important. I say to people I work with, I can be the most irritating person that you will work with because I will keep asking you questions until we drive down and understand what the problem is. So that's my skill is not about going and talking to a bunch of journalists. That's not me at all. You know, I'm very low down in the order, Ahmed. And about strikes.
But you are in the union with the media people now.
Oh, yeah, but that's not me. I'm a background. I like talking to you lot. I don't want to talk to journalists. I like people like you who, like, you know, Buddha said, you don't have to follow anybody, not your elders, not the experts, just because they're elders and experts. But if you listen to everyone and then make sense of what's being said to you with your own values, then you will achieve what you want to do. And so I like talking to people like you because we actually share values about unity and about coming together. Now, to go to Ahmed's second question about strike.
Before you go there, don't you think these people that are in the press conference are the people that would take the issues to people while they be the press people?
Ahmed, they're not allowed to do that because they're just employees. Every journalist has an editor. So if you work for a newspaper, if you're on screen, they are very tightly managed. So I might, as a journalist, I might spend hours writing a story and the editor looks at it and says, well, I don't like that bit and that doesn't work and we won't do that. And this is the headline. So a journalist does not have control over their work being published. Yeah, I think that that's another thing we could talk about. So yeah, this is what is the value of our media when it's controlled by one of the richest people on earth. And that's our shame. He's from here. When it comes to strikes, just quickly, a strike hits the news, but it is a sign of really, really angry people who might have been consulted with, often not, They probably have already gone through lots of negotiations, lots of meetings, lots of trying to make sense of what they're trying to do. Before they go on strike, they will sign petitions. They will create advocacy statements. They will have meetings at lunchtime. They might stop for an hour. You know, the strikes that go on are really, really serious because the relationship is so bad. They've lost sight of what's in common. But the other reason they do it sometimes is because if a company's doing pretty badly and the whole workforce goes out for a couple of weeks, they don't have to pay for it. So it's a bit of a windfall for their accounts. And so unions have, especially some of the mining unions, if a mine's going down the drain, often the tactic is to try to get the union to go on strike. And they've had to learn not to do that because it's just a windfall. And we saw shares going up. Now, that never gets reported, but we know how this works, and it's how they negotiate. You know, we all use tactics. None of us are perfect, but, you know, some companies' shares have gone up, a couple of the mining companies up north. Okay, I do talk a lot. I'm sorry, Siva.
Thank you. No. That was good. We brought you here, and we are going to see you more often. Now we have Panja and then Vasanta. Unmute and talk. Panja, you have to unmute.
Yes, sorry. From my small understanding of the whole topic today, because I was in
Panja is from Malaysia. Panja is from Malaysia.
Yeah, I'm from Malaysia.
Hello.
Yeah.
Where are you in Malaysia?
I'm in a place called Subang Jaya, about an hour from the KL, capital city.
Down the bottom, yeah.
I was in the government service all this while. And I mean, retired time, many years ago, I should say. To me, this understanding of unions and the economy of the world and systems of, labor, unions, etc. What I feel at this time, all things to be made new. There must be a system for the common justice, education, training, common good of the workers. Financial system should be reorganized because the money values are fluctuating and people don't have money. Now, my country is going through this. Prices are going up every day. And, flights, tickets, everything is going up. And perhaps we go back to the barter trade, those days. One day we might end up there. And so workers and dealing with workers, we are dealing with human beings. In certain countries, I see child labor, and also the payments and the way they stay. They are not provided accommodation. They stay in slums in India, especially. I've been there for a while, and it's very painful to see human beings treated that way. After all, the unionists and the presidents and the ministers are all human beings. So a new system of education, training, the sense of justice, and also we are going through the change in climate changes, then health, even the World Health Organization is, I don't know how to say, uncertain about the medication, and COVID, ruined the whole world and systems. So here we have to think that all things should be made new, systems of governance and labor unions should be changed for the common good of man. Then there will be some justification how workers should be treated, and migrant workers. Who are migrants? They are people who lost everything and they're coming over to find a job to survive. And if you can't understand these basic human rights, I don't know how to word it. I'm sorry if I, divert them.
I think you're saying it very well. And I think you know, this is my other experience is that whether you're in Malaysia, whether you're in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Zimbabwe, anywhere in the world, we all know our systems are broken.
That's right.
Never before have we experienced such a community of concern about the broken systems, because globalization has hit all of us. Even workers in the United States aren't getting a fair deal, and it's their corporations who have heralded this new time. So I think you're right. I do want new systems, but what we have to do to get the new systems is to be able to say, if we rise, we must rise together so that we balance the power. Otherwise, the corporations will just tell our governments what to do. That's our burden, is that we live in democracies, but we are not as powerful with our governments because of all the free trade agreements. That's a joke, free trade agreements, which favour the rich.
That's right. And we all need unity, unison. All countries of the world should work towards a common good. Thank you.
That's right. Santha's been so polite and waiting.
I have a question. Now all these government organizations, they are trying to engage private consultants and contractors and just managing it, and so that they don't, and paying so much money to them, and and also they don't want to take the responsibility of employing people directly and doing the job themselves. So
Yes.
what do you think of that? And the other thing is also they are trying to negotiate individual contractors with employees, and so that they try to screw them as much as possible and fire them whenever they want to. So what do you think of those things, those two type of?
So in 2011, I sat on an inquiry about insecure work that the ACTU put together. We had Brian Howe, who was Deputy Prime Minister at one stage, Sarah Charlesworth, who's a notable academic, and Paul Munro, who was a retired judge, and me. You know, I had great company. I felt sorry for them. What we knew then was every government was as bad as each other. It didn't matter what colour T-shirts they wore on election day. All of them were using tactics to hide consultants and agency staff so that they could argue that their salary bills were going down, but there was no transparency. Most employers who use labour hire or agencies, like here's an example, the road between here and Newcastle, every person who worked on that was charged at a rate of $70, but the worker got $30. Government does the same thing when it's hiring agency people. Centrelink, full of agency people, lots of money goes to the agents, little goes to the workers. I think that's wrong. I don't think that's ethical. I think that's a form of exploitation, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's certainly daft thinking by the government that they're prepared to pay that, but it's always a tactic to try to break us. They're trying to stop us from unifying. They're trying to have a division between, the insecurely employed and the securely employed. It's called the core periphery model of employment. And they do it as a tactic to reduce wages, to build division, but basically it's about exploitation. The governments as employers are all quite ethically corrupt on this point.
So what can
What we do about it? This is why you will hear the ACTU say we need to change the definitions. The legislation has to be about workers, not about employees, because that's a loophole that too many employers have used to say, oh, this person isn't an employee. They're a contractor. They have their own ABN. Oh, they're labour hire. We're not responsible for them. It's all tactics. That's why we've got to get back to somebody who works needs to have the same rights, whether they're called an employee, whether they're called a contractor. These are just loopholes that employer, not individual employers, but big employer organisations have paid lots of motzes to lawyers to develop this. Does it solve the problems for anybody? No, it's just about money for profit. We got to follow that debate, please. Follow the debate about why we need to change the definitions. Humans are working people. We should not be declassified so that some of us get less rights than others. Poor Siva. I'm sorry, am I a nightmare? Because it's 9 o'clock.
No, thank you. Thank you. It was beautiful and wonderful. I think you enlightened us on many things that we were not quite familiar with. We know about the unions, but that's all. Anyway, I just want to say thank you to you and all the people who participated and asked questions. One of the things that Baha'u'llah said, he said that the well-being of mankind and its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established.
Yeah.
And this unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels revealed by the pen of the Most High are suffered to pass unheeded. So we cannot have welfare of the humanity without unity. So we had to work for unity. So that's one of the reasons that we are holding these gatherings. But he says that unity cannot be achieved if you don't listen to the guidance given by God. So the love thy neighbor or service to humanity, to be honest, all these things which you are trying to do through the work that you are doing is wonderful. Hopefully we can work together to achieve some of these things. And thank you and God bless you and everyone.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you so much for your interest in your company.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Very educational.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks, John.
Thank you. Good night.
See you, everybody.
Good night. Thank you, Jill.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.